Hello, and welcome to yet another installment of The Rogues Gallery. In today's episode, we welcome our very first and very deadly guest, the Velocirapture. I would warn any listeners who suffer from ornithoskeletophobia to steer clear of this episode on account of... what? Fear of dinosaurs, of course. What else would it be? Well, it's not my fault you know nothing of the subtle art of fearography. Please enjoy the following episode. It does happen to include some rather fantastic on-air disembowelments, as well as, if I may say so, some fabulous interviewing by myself. And Freakuency makes an appearance. Adieu.
And then, of course, load the fresh lacinato kale. You really can't have too much kale, so I'd recommend about 8 or 19 pounds of it to really get that crisp texture. And if you're looking for something a little sweet, try adding some carrot peels. Most people don't think of carrots as sweet, but next to kale, they taste like cotton candy.
Excellent. And something the kids can enjoy too. Well, that's about all the time we have here on Farm to Table. If you want to learn more about our show or find more delicious locally sourced organic recipes, visit us on the web at wmic.org/farm-to-table. That's farm, 2, table.com/blog.net. Thanks for listening. This week's guests were Swedish root farmer Sven Arn, gastropub produce buyer Kit Mackman, and 5-star salad tosser Evelyn Grange. I've been your host, Devin Carnegie, and you're listening to WMIC, Midway's Public Radio.
Welcome, Gallerinos, to another episode of The Rogues Gallery. I am your host, the emerald-haired god of music himself, Freakuency!
What, pray tell, is a gallerino?
It's what we call our fans.
Firstly, we do not call anybody gallerinos, because I would sooner go back to drawing couples caricatures at the pier than use that word one more time. Secondarily, we have no fans. This is the second episode of a public radio program which we are compelled to host, and that is not a medium that often attracts a fan base.
Now wait, back up. What was the thing that you weren't gonna say again? Was it...
I'm not going to say it.
You're not going to say... Gallerino?
No.
Come on, say it! It feels so good!
And I, likewise, am your host, virtuoso of the visual and adept of the aesthetic, Fugitive Color. Thank you for joining us on the air today, you denizens of Midway City. We do apologize for the tone of our first show. Given the circumstances of our participation in this radio program, tempers were a bit high. We will do our very best to be civil. This is as much a professional courtesy as it is the newest in a growing list of terms to our parole.
Let's get right into it, shall we? Today's top stories. There's been a break-in at the Henrietta Midway preschool? Am I reading that right? I can't possibly be reading that right. It says that 2 masked intruders broke into Mrs. Thompson's class somewhere between her nap time and the lecture on shapes. They didn't take anything, nor have they left. They're just silently attending this afternoon's curriculum. We'll have more on the story as it develops.
Panic in the bowling district, as local Christian bowling team Corinthians 7-10 Split was accosted on their way home from practice by rival team the Gutter Sluts. The bowling district has been a hotbed for crime ever since the Dick Weber tournament of bowling excellence arrived in our fair Midway City. All 8 of the city's bowling alleys have been at each other's throats, in one case literally, over who is to host the tournament. As of press time, the tournament is scheduled to be held at General Lane's, the favorite spot of Midway's premier bowling team, the Norm Dukes of Hazzard.
The big showdown football match between Midway's own Atlas University Titans and Beacon City University's Beacons was interrupted last night as chaos broke out into the octagon. Electric Mummy, who was supposed to be performing the halftime show, accidentally set off his pyrotechnics early, resulting in a swarm of voltaic locusts exploding onto the field. Due to Electric Mummy's poorly timed stage plague, all residents of Atlas University are to put a mark of lamb's blood over their door as to not suffer the destroyer to come into their homes and smite them. You'll get 'em next time, Titans!
Midway City News reports that following last night's airborne battle between the Skywriter and the Dead Baron, one of their traffic helicopters is missing. The helicopter reported damage following an extended period of dogfighting, but after that they simply disappeared. No crash has been reported, but eyewitnesses say the helicopter was spotted spiraling out of control above the Televis Cable Community Park.
And of course, this week's New Fortune bank robbing was performed by Tower of Power, who was brought to justice when, during his hasty escape, he struck his much elevated head on the doorway and knocked himself unconscious. A noble effort, Mr. Power.
Now, as you know, this show was conceived as a platform to decry and denounce acts of villainy and to champion the righteous and heroic. Now, we don't particularly care for this course of narrative, but our parole terms insist otherwise. And so we are obliged to bring guests onto our charade of a show to prop them up before you and let you ooh and ah at their supposed valor and bravery. Our first guest... Oh, well now, this is interesting. Our first guest is here to publicly contest his imposed villain status. He claims that he is a hero doing, and this is a direct quote, the divine work of our good Lord. He is currently in a battle to change his legal status to hero with the Midway Costumed Justice Authority. Welcome to our show, pillar of the Midway City born-again revival movement, and wanted mass-murdering prehistoric beast, Velocirapture.
Well, thank y'all for having me. It's quite an honor to be here speaking to the good people of Midway City.
Oh yes, I revel in the opportunity.
Now, Velocirapture, I'm sorry, just a minute. Are you a Velociraptor or like a chicken man?
I'm sorry?
Well, like, what's with the feathers? I've seen Jurassic Park. I know what a Velociraptor looks like, and it ain't feathery.
Well, Hollywood can exaggerate from time to time. The dinosaur they call Velociraptor in those movies is more like a Deinonychus, a close cousin of mine, genetically speaking.
You mean to tell me that I don't know what a Velociraptor is? Next you'll be telling me a Triceratops only has 3 horns.
Please ignore the paleontology professor's confusion. His racist comments are not the views of this host, nor those of WMIC. Now, your argument is that, though you do kill your enemies, and rather violently, I might add...
Well, my natural weapons are tooth and claw, Mr. Color. Things can get messy when you tussle with a dinosaur.
Quite. At any rate, you would argue that you use these natural meat separators for the good of the greater Midway community?
Indeed I would. Why, just recently, I was arrested for the evisceration of 3 young vagabonds who had set out to rob an armored car, if you can believe it. Well, I put those fellas in their places. In fact, I'd spread each of those boys to several places by the time it was all over. I was exonerated, of course, when it was found to be self-defense on account of they was armed.
Well, those certainly sound like actions somewhat parallel to heroism. However, that doesn't really tell the whole story, does it?
No, it sure doesn't. Velocirapture, I have a newspaper story here from 3 weeks ago saying that you killed a whole Boy Scout troop on a camping trip. Are you going to tell me that they were plotting kidnapping or building a Pinewood death ray?
Oh, yes, I hunted them down through the woods, every last one. I can still feel their fear sting in my nostrils. One of the last ones, he screamed for near an hour before he finally bled out there in the dirt. I'm sorry. Memories. What was the question?
Well, I guess I'm just wondering how that isn't, like, super evil.
Oh, no, my dear boy. It's quite the opposite, in fact. I sent those boys to their eternal reward. They're with Jesus now. You see, this is where my message has gone all cattywampus in the media. I ain't never murdered no innocent people.
Is that so?
Yes, sir, that is a bona fide fact. I have released the innocent from their mortal toil is all. They was suffering here on earth because they was away from Jesus. I ended that suffering and showed them his everlasting light.
You ended the suffering of healthy children by gutting them with your razor-sharp talons and letting them bleed out alone in the woods.
Oh, God, I think you might be starting to understand, son. I may only be a simple government dinosaur grown in a lab for later weaponization, but I do know one thing. God has a plan, and that plan includes yours truly eating the living sin out of every man, woman, and child in this city.
A noble effort, to be sure.
So, you kill bad people because they're bad, but you kill good people to send them to heaven, so you just killed everybody?
Well, now, killed is a very ugly word, with a number of serious stigmas attached to it.
Among them, to be sure, would be that most famous of commandments, thou shalt not kill.
Quite right, my fugitively colored friend, quite very certainly right. Which is why I must remind my flock that there is a new covenant put forth by Jesus, that we should live forever without sin, through faith in him. You see, my sins are washed away in the love of our Lord, and I'm washing away the sins of my flock. What greater love can there be than to send a soul to its judgment and reward before our loving God? So no, I ain't never killed nobody, only just hurried them on to heaven.
Except the ones you send to hell.
Yes, except the ones I send to hell.
Fascinating. Now, you mentioned earlier that you were a genetic experiment bred in a test tube by the government. How do you reconcile that with your abundant faith?
Well now, some folks reckon that them scientists was playing God when they grown me in that there lab, but I prefer to think that God was working his wonders through the hand of man.
So you're saying God made you in a secret government lab, which, if I'm not mistaken, you then destroyed in a bloodbath.
Holy bloodbath.
Right, holy bloodbath, killing 17 government employees and a number of law enforcement officials before escaping into the wild. I mean, that's not exactly your traditional upbringing. Where did you even learn about religion?
Well, I suppose the way anybody does. By stalking a tent revival preacher through the tall grass near his camper trailer off the I-26. Just before I pounced on him to eat his holy face, I heard him speak the most beautiful words. But ask now the beasts, and they shall teach thee. Job, book 12, verse 7.
So you spared him, and he brought you into the fold?
Oh, mercy, no. I ate him up faster than a sneeze through a screen door. But I took up in his trailer for a spell, and I took to reading that good book. It changed me, boys. Sure as I stand here before you, that gospel changed me. And since the tent revival didn't have a preacher no more, I figured I'd just start up doing that. And boy, I took to it like a house on fire. Congregation grew by double in less than a month. Some folks say it was to see a dinosaur preaching, but I do believe it was the holy word that poured straight out of me and into their fresh, plump, juicy hearts.
I'm gonna go ahead and say it was probably the first thing.
Well, either way, that's when I knew my true calling, to use this perfect body as a tool for the Lord. Midway City is full to bursting with sin, but salvation calls as well. So I'll kill 'em all and let the good Lord sort 'em out.
That's quite a platform to have when petitioning for hero status. If I'm being honest, having heard your story, I'm not sure the MCPD guards here at the station will let you go without further questioning.
I don't see why not. I released them all of that earthly tumult on my way in, you see.
You killed them? All of them?
Well, of course. I feel like you've not been listening very closely. I am a whirlwind of disembowelment for the glory of the Lord.
So, this whole time, we've been conducting this interview.
We could have just walked right out the door?
Oh, I suppose so. But don't you feel much better knowing you've helped spread the good word to the people of Midway? We've done some powerful work here today, boys.
Maybe there's still time.
Yeah,
Maybe we can...
Oh, I kindly doubt it. You hear that? Helicopters. Yeah, they'll probably be storming the building in just a minute. Long as you boys keep your hands up and cooperate, I'm sure you'll be just fine.
But what about you?
Oh, I'll be arrested, I'm sure. My hearing is in just a couple of days, though. They usually give me a cell to myself, so I'm sure I'll get along just fine. Well, I suppose this is it, boys. Oh, I feel the love of the Lord swelling up in me something fierce. Remember, Job 12:7.
This is WMIC, Midway's public radio station. Support for this program comes from...
Another day of the same old, wishing to escape and live on the wild side? Take some chances? Go to a pool? Well, in Midway City, there's no better place than Crystal Lake Casino. With wall-to-wall slot machines, you'll be rolling in nickels faster than you can go rent yourself a locker, put your things inside, and go to the pool. Head on down to the poolside tables and try your hand at any one of two kinds of world-class poker, or spin the roulette wheel to win big. Looking to roll the dice? Sorry, friend, no craps in the pool. Maybe you're a fan of blackjack. Well, instead of the standard blackjack tables you'll find at any normal casino, you'll find yourself a luxury blackjack suite to stay in, with an excellent view of our gorgeous pool. With a pool this nice, everyone's a winner at Crystal Lake Casino.
Well, listeners, I can truly say I've never seen so much blood in my life. As the tactical response team arrived, our guest Velocirapture became a frightful monster, very unlike the soft-spoken lizard preacher we had interviewed only moments before.
Lizard chicken preacher. That guy had a real foghorn leghorn thing going on.
Yes, well, he managed to slaughter 6 heavily armed men before being subdued and removed from the premises. We are being allowed to finish our show under the watchful eye of the MCPD SWAT division, while suitable replacements are found for our daily guards and escorts. I would like to wish Velocirapture Godspeed on his journey, and 7 angels sound 7 trumpets to guide you to your reward, whatever it may be.
Speaking of trumpets or whatever, that reminds me, I've cooked up something extra special for this week's episode of the Rogues Gallery. You see, the music that's starting to drift into your ears as we speak has been altered by a most devious producer. Namely me. As you begin to dance along, you may notice yourself feeling a little uneasy. That's normal, I assure you. Also normal is the rising urge to grab that kitchen knife you left out and plunge it deep within your stomach. Or maybe, just maybe, you feel like jackknifing your steering wheel into oncoming traffic. I know you're listening carefully, so hear me when I say that this music has been specifically designed to make you act out those latent urges of ending it all, for you or the loved one who you are ever so carefully grasping the throat of. This is the music of your discontent. This is the soundtrack to your demise. You thought the walls of this shoddy radio station could hold me? You thought you were safe from frequency? Nowhere is safe. As long as you can hear, you can bleed. And bleed you will. The streets will run red with the blood of the innocents as I... What? What are you laughing at?
No, continue on, don't let me stop you.
What? What's funny? This is my moment! How dare you interrupt a villain's monologue as he's finally realized his evil plan? That's day one stuff, man!
Well, the one thing I've realized here is how idiotic you really are. Did you expect them to allow you to play music on this show? I assume you figured I had worked out a deal with our producers to do all of the poster artwork as well.
Of course not. They're gonna get a real artist for that. Unless they need someone to draw a picture of you, since I know you're so talented at drawing dicks.
You know, never mind. Let's just move on to taking calls. At least that way I can listen to something other than what was, to be sure, one of the lowest points of your career as a supervillain. First caller, you are on the air.
Hello? I've got a question. Do you guys ever wonder why us villains have to give long expository monologues to our arch nemesis before we can go through with our grand evil plan? You know, you've got someone bolted down on some sort of metal stretcher, or saw blade conveyor belt, or even fastened to a giant oak tree, but instead of just doing whatever it is you're trying to do, you start telling the hero about how you've got genetically modified acorns strategically placed in an underground network in order to grow more giant oak trees in the middle of modern civilization to give your army of mutant flying squirrels a place to live comfortably before you fasten them into a living suit made of those same mutant flying squirrels in order to glide through the air like the flying squirrel you always wished you had been born as. That's all.
I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say that this is flaying squirrel. And if that is the case, I'd just like to start by saying that I'm oh so sorry to hear how things went during your last run-in with Mr. Whiskers.
What does one say about the rich tapestry of history that makes up the modern villainous monologue? Back in the 60s, it was considered poor form not to give a monologue when dispatching, or more often attempting to dispatch, one's nemesis. If a super spy had the panache to don a tuxedo for his attempt on your life, you certainly owed the man a last tumbler of gin and an explanation of your megalomaniacal machinations. Why, even as far back as the black and white silent villains of the early 20th century, a pantomimed wringing of hands and shaking of fists was in order, and no less than 3 ha's per dialogue intertitle.
Fast forward to the Batty Boomer generation, and people used to get dressed up to deliver their monologues. It was an occasion to be celebrated. Just like what happened to airline travel, it seems nowadays you can be standing in the checkout line at a bank and see any Tom, Dick, and Harley talking to the tellers about how their world has been wronged while wearing a ski mask and sweatpants with a mustard stain from last week's hot dogtopus. But sincerely, Flaying Squirrel, thank you for keeping the tradition alive. Not everyone has the same patience to build weaponized excuses for detailed plan sharing that you seem to, and we here at the Rogues Gallery greatly appreciate it.
Next caller, you are on the air.
Yeah, this one's for Fugitive Color. Tell me about the job that cut away.
Prague, 1997. The score, as it were, was the entirety of Alphonse Mucha's Slav epic. My partner at the time, an international art thief of some repute, operating under the alias Elvisan, had planned the transgression meticulously. Guard shift changes, security camera angles, plumbing outlets, sewage disposal schedule, septic tank locations. Actually, as I say it now, there was probably too much research put into the building's drainage conduits. At any rate, we were halfway into the museum when a security gate, triggered by a silent alarm, separated us. I turned just in time to see Elvisan disappear through a window, with Kandinsky's Landscape with 2 Poplars in tow. Slav Epic had never been the target. I had been set up. I managed to escape that night by the skin of my teeth and with the help of my enormous talent and intellect. I never managed to get Slav Epic out of the museum, nor did I ever see Elvison again. Nor, in fact, have I been back to Prague. Dark days indeed. Of course, I heard a few years later that Elvison had been captured by the Mexican cartel and beheaded for trying to steal a Diego Rivera from them, so that brought a smile to my face.
Yeah, go ahead. You're on the air with the Rogues Gallery.
Hey, yeah, my name's Rod. I had a question for Freakuency. What's your dream lair? Like, you know how most villains have, like, that island castle or, like, some kind of subterranean fortress. What would you build if you had, like, you know, no budget, dream lair? By the way, I am a contractor, so hit me up if you're ever into making this happen for real. All right, see you guys.
Ah, the dream lair. I'd be lying if I said I hadn't spent a rather large part of my prison sentence dreaming of what it would be like when I finally had the perfect lair to call my own. The facade would naturally be a nightclub. I'd call it Shockwave. No! Shock.wave. It would be the most electric spot in Midway City. While everyone slings back their whiskey and coke, I'll be downstairs in my secret lair, affectionately called Decihel. All the walls will be soundproof, naturally, and every room will be set up for recording so I can resample all the agonizing screams coming from my torture chamber megahertz, where I'll be forcing my foes to endure 100 pascals of pure pulsing pain, or making their worst nightmares a reality by vibrating their eyeballs into seeing distorted figures haunting their every move. There will be fan art, of course, from all of my admirers, adorning each room, as well as cover posters from all of my villainous exploits. Definitely a sushi chef and accompanying sushi girl. Maybe an in-house tattoo artist. I want a ball pit. I want some plastic slides going from one floor to the next. I want a room full of cymbal-clapping monkeys that I will tell people is my percussion room. However, there will be one rule at Shock.wave. No requests.
Next caller.
Hello? Am I here? Do you guys smell that? What's that smell? I'll take my answer off the air.
Although I can't say for certain if we are smelling the same smell, as I have no idea who or where you even are, let me describe to you what I am smelling. The sweet, wafting aroma that comes to us all from time to time, tantalizing the nostrils and promising deep relief. That smell, dear listener, is the smell of the end. The end, that is, of another episode of the Rogues Gallery. I have been Fugitive Color, and to my right sits the nearly coherent Freakuency. This is, of course, WMIC, Midway's Public Radio.
The Rogues Gallery is a production of WMIC Radio. The Rogues Gallery is written, hosted, and produced by Josh Danforth and Colin Wilson. We'd like to thank Elena Carlson for her appearance on this episode. Log on to www.roguesgallerypod.com to hear more episodes, get special extras, and learn more about the villains, including this week's special featured villain, Velocirapture. Thanks for listening.
A little more oomph at the beginning.
Sure.
Panic in the bowling.
You gotta do it like that.